Now that the guitar body is fixed internally, we can start to worry about the bridge, which, as we talked about, is missing the bottom part here. This one is just an example. It doesn't really fit this top part, so I will attempt to make a new one. But just for demonstration purposes, it will look something like this. I went ahead and bolted the neck back onto the body just to see what we have in terms of geometry, because whatever curvature the top will ever get back, it probably has now after I re-glued the braces. Okay, so let's go ahead and just measure the projection here. For that, I put a straight edge on the frets, and in the position of the bridge, I just measure the height we get here. And we're in the ballpark of 21 millimeters, which is still pretty low, I suppose. If we just estimate a rough height of the bridge with the feet on there, that alone is just below 30 millimeters. So what's the order of operation here? I could make a base that is very narrow to accommodate this neck angle, but since we have a bolt-on neck and it will be pretty easy to put a shim in there and change the angle, I will attempt to make the bridge base similar to this one, just with the right curvature and right spacing, and then just see wherever I end up in height and adjust the neck accordingly. These parts might look like ebony from a distance, but if you turn them over, at least on the German guitars, there are almost always some type of, often you see maple or beech or something like that, just stained dark. So I will use the same approach and see what I can come up with, and then stain it to match. Yeah, that's a decent color match. It's not perfect, and depending on the light, it can appear like a little bit of a different shade. But if you consider the overall package in comparison to the guitar, I think it fits in quite well. To get a similar light sheen on the part, I will just do a quick little wax polish. So this is some furniture wax. Just get it on there and buff it out. That should do the trick. Just a bit of CA glue to secure the studs. Make sure they are flush and so we don't harm the finish of the guitar. Now that we have the bridge on there, we can start looking into the overall geometry of the guitar, mainly adjusting the neck angle, because at the moment it does not quite match up. See right now the top of the neck is way below the top of the bridge. So the new bridge seems to be much too high. That means we need to tip the neck forward in order to make it come out in a straight line. Some quick trigonometry tells us we need a shim in this case of about 1.85 millimeters. So I went ahead and made that out of some maple. And if you're wondering about the unusual shape, on most solid body guitars you would have it below the neck on a neck heel like this, but in this case we will use it vertically behind the neck heel. See, the lower end is basically tapering to 0 and the bottom has 1.85 millimeters, and it will sit here later on. So the neck ends up getting tipped forward. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. That's what we want to see. The top of the fretboard is perfectly in line with the top of the bridge, and we still have some adjustment room left in the bridge to adjust it down. Servicing these tuners is pretty difficult since they're all riveted together and you can't really take them apart easily. So yeah, it's difficult when you try to polish to get into all the little nooks and crannies. But I think the result is okay. I mean, they look much better than before. Pretty shiny too. So all I can do for servicing them now is to add some lubrication. I'll just use some light oil on the bearing surfaces here. Although that's like steel running on brass, so by definition it should be self-lubricating almost. But you can feel some of them are a little bit stiffer, some are a little bit looser. They will never be perfect, but they should benefit from a little oil nevertheless. I think we have to make another part. Remember the broken little jack socket here, made out of plastic? In order to replace this, I figured out I'd go with one of those barrel jack types. This one is a Switchcraft. And I will try to mount it the same way. So I'll make a little, what's it called, like a little bracket for that. And I already started work on that. Just drilled some holes in this piece of aluminum. So next step is cutting it out. So this is the result after a bunch of filing and sanding. And I think this should do the trick just fine. Okay, so we looked at nearly every part of the guitar except for the neck and the fretboard, which will likely require a bunch more work. So what are we dealing with here? This is a neck laminated from 3 sections of beech. Beech is not your typical neck wood, at least for like American-made guitars, but you see it on many European designs. If we check out the back of the heel, you can tell like this section down here is the main neck and has like 1, 2, 3 pieces of beech, whereas this is just the heel glued on, of course. And then the fingerboard extension, they often use some type of softwood for the extension. Usually it's like grafted in around here with like a second joint, but that's pretty hard to tell. Could be one piece. We do not have a truss rod, so whatever shape the neck is in, it's pretty much what it's gonna be. The next interesting thing, of course, the side dots. I like this design. Now let's take a closer look at the fretboard. This is unusual, isn't it? Apart from the wear pattern here, this for all the world looks like a softwood to me. I mean, this could... Notice the grain lines? This looks very similar to an acoustic guitar top. I mean, that could be like a spruce potentially. Just look at the arrow around the 0 fret. That does look like spruce, maybe stained dark. You can see like the heavy play wear in here, which really speaks for softwood. That's a very unusual choice for a fretboard. And not really what you want to see, because ideally you would want a hard and wear-resistant wood on there. Maybe that just speaks for the scarcity of materials back then in Eastern Germany. This guitar is probably like late 50s, maybe early 60s. Maybe they didn't have access to nice rosewood at the moment, so they just made do with whatever they had. And if you talk to people from back then in the day, this making do with whatever you have is like a very common mentality, or was a common mentality back then in Eastern Germany. So, yeah. Well, after multiple attempts, I'm kind of over trying to save the old frets. See how much I had to take off here in the lower positions? And if we move to the area of like 11th and 12th fret, I still have this massive low spot up here, and then the high frets are almost completely gone. I don't really feel great doing that. And notice, the radius is super inconsistent. Here we have something a little bit flatter, in the middle even flatter. Up here it almost fits. So after a while of debating, I do not want to go all the way, because going all the way would mean taking the fretboard off, inserting like a truss rod or maybe even some carbon fiber rods to stiffen it. And then in this case I might as well make a new fretboard, since it's some kind of weird funky softwood. I don't want to do that. I think the intermediate step would be to refret it, and while I have the frets out, to sand it plain and sand a consistent radius in there, and then I might have a better chance of getting it playable. Let's try that. Frets are out, and now we can really see how bad the board looks. I think it will be good to plane it down a little bit. Also notice how the frets were not on an even radius. They were kind of flat in the middle and more radius on the ends. And fun fact, this fret wire did not have the little barbs to hold it in. They just hammered these little notches in. This is like ancient fret wire. This wire is about 1.8 wide and about 1.0 millimeters tall. I really thought this funny softwood on the fretboard here was just stained on the surface to look a little bit more darker. But removing some stuff and even some plain shavings, it is remarkably brown and colored throughout. So this is very much like mahogany color. Even the dust that's coming off there. So whatever they did, maybe some chemical stuff where they soak it in some vapor of whatever, or maybe they even did like heat treating, or like baking or roasting. As you can tell up here, I didn't remove that much material, so some of the deep play wear is still visible, and I actually kind of like that to be visible. I just removed enough to make sure we have just a really straight neck. Cleaning out the fret slots. New threads are in and crowned. They don't really look great right now because we still need to do the polishing, but I just wanted to quickly show. This is like one of the old threads, and those terminated right before the binding, but I opted to go for the more modern approach of extending the thread over the binding so we get a little bit more playing surface. Here's the before and after. Only, what, like 18 more to go? All right, so let's put this thing together for a second time. And fingers crossed, it should play a bit better now.